Cedra Sherrod-Strong is a longtime police lieutenant with the LA County Sheriff's Department. Lieutenant, did this driver do the right thing by exiting off the freeway or the expressway, whatever they call it in Australia? Because that required him to slow down, and this car with this crazy guy with an axe had the chance to bump into him, crash into him.
I think that he was doing something well to try to get away, which is something that you should be trying to do. By all means, you don't try to keep up with someone who's hanging out of the window with an axe.
What do you recommend to drivers who find themselves on an expressway, freeway, or even any road with a driver who's clearly unhinged, you know, for whatever reason, angry, wielding a weapon? What should you do?
I call it practicing the pause. First of all, get a hold of your own emotions and opt out. I do not want to further this, so allow them to pass, allow them to keep going, create some space. And again, if you're on a freeway, for example, there is an exit coming. You have to really be paying attention and mindful of what's going on. Let them get past that exit and then you take it.
And if you have a passenger in the car with you, have them not only record what's happening, but call 911.
Yes, and I would rather they call 911 rather than recording.
Jim Byler is a retired police lieutenant. I know you tell people never, ever to do this. I'm sure you didn't approve of our grandma unmasking the shoplifter.
Not the wisest thing to do. I mean, the bottom line is it only takes a few seconds or a split second to attack someone, and she could have been hurt before anybody even had a chance to come to her aid.
Can you understand, though, in this case, both the man who was recording the shoplifter and the grandma who basically stopped the shoplifter were fed up?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel the same frustration that when you see these repeated images of just lawlessness, you get fed up. You're going to see more people just say, you know what, I've had enough, and they're going to step up and try to intervene and try to stop the suspect.
In this case, that grandma didn't know if that shoplifter might have a weapon, and he didn't even need to have a weapon in order to really hurt her. If he had shoved her hard and she'd fallen and hit her head, it was dangerous to do what she did.
When she physically engaged him by pulling off his mask, she definitely escalated the situation. Police officers all across the country are going through de-escalation training, and it's really good if citizens understand that they need to try to de-escalate situations as well.
Bottom line, the best thing you can do is keep your distance and maybe get that phone out and record what they're doing.
Really, if there's going to be an investigation, you just want to be a good cooperating witness so that you can be there to identify the suspect if the police need you to do that, turn over any reporting that you might have that you took. But I would really hesitate to advise grandmas to intervene in situations like that. Not a good idea.
Yeah, we may be cheering this particular grandma because it all turned out okay, but please don't do that.
Exactly.
How fast was that 17-year-old in that BMW going?
He had to be approaching 100 miles an hour. When you see him come around that corner, Elizabeth, that car is made, you know, for the Autobahn. You know, that's what they build those for. And he came around, you could see the back end, started drifting, losing traction, but he didn't know how to handle it, obviously. He didn't steer into it and drive it. He lost total control. And what are the odds that right where he ends up is where the highway patrolman is?
This is a very high-performance car. Was there any way for him to regain control once the back end starts to drift out like that?
Yeah, an accomplished driver can, what they say is steering into it. It's much like driving on ice, where you don't steer the other way, you actually steer into it, which compensates and shifts the weight back. And when you see these drift drivers, like we see in these videos where they're going in the circles, their wheels are pointed in the direction that they're intending the car to go. And he didn't. He overcorrected. He rushed it. He kind of, got nervous, and that turned the car, and then it was out of control. And when he hit the grass, it was like being on, ice, and it just catapulted that car right towards the officer, and he had no chance.
That officer, I mean, my gosh, thank God he saw something out of the corner of his eye, turned, looked, and jumped all at the same time.
that officer, he was not only observant and saw what was coming, anticipated it, he had the tenacity to get out from between the car and the guardrail. If he hadn't have done that, as we see in the video, he would have been crushed. And it could have been fatal for him.
He had a millisecond to act, and he chose the right thing to do.
That was obviously training, because it becomes innate at some point. Because if he would have just stood there in disbelief that this guy's coming towards him, it could have been a much worse outcome for him.
I was surprised that she was alone, especially because it was a domestic violence call, and she's a woman.
I'm not sure about Oklahoma, but I know here in California, we will actually approach these type of calls at least with two people, because I have to imagine that the familiarity with the home only belongs to those people who are in the home. And you're walking up to so many unknowns, and you're also dealing with two people that are already angry with each other.
This shows how quickly a routine domestic violence call can turn violent, because 1 second she's asking him questions, and the next he's pummeling her. And I mean, it doesn't appear that there's anything that sparks the violence. It's just, it explodes in a nanosecond.
Absolutely. And within those seconds, she is only able to respond as well as whatever's in her mind in the moment. Walking up to a call that is domestic violence, there's an anger factor there, and you don't know at what point you're walking into that call. Another thing to think about is whatever way the call came out to the officers in their actual MDC, as we call the mobile digital computer, whatever way it was written in there, be it a domestic dispute or violence, depending on that wording, that too sets a tone for the officer, thinking maybe I'm not walking up to as something as bad as it really is. In this case, they had already been to the house, and now he was gone, and then this is on a return.
So it was the third time that night that he had come back.
Yes, this was the third time for the officers at this particular house for this suspect. He hadn't been there when they had been to the home before. At
some point, finally, somebody in that apartment gets him off the officer, who is being beaten to a pulp. She is seriously, seriously hurt. And because she's unconscious, I mean, she is nothing but extremely vulnerable.
Officers are vulnerable from the moment that they are no longer able to do something in defense, even in offense of something, and she's there with equipment available. That person stepping in pretty much actually helped to pause, because the way he was pummeling her, it didn't seem like he was going to stop.
No. How much damage did he do? How badly did he hurt her?
I believe that there was an orbital fracture and some really serious damage to her facial area, because he was punching her in the head. And there may have been some other internal things with her head as well.
Do you know what this man was eventually charged with?
With regard to the domestic violence, there was also the additional add of strangulation, because he had tried to strangle someone, and he had also had assault on a peace officer.
Well, he was held on $10 million bond. That's a high bond, but that's a serious assault that he was caught on police body cam committing.
Absolutely. And a lot of things factor into this, because he was also with a criminal history. Is he a flight risk? You know, what's the actual circumstances surrounding this particular incident and how bad it was? And then with this one, it was pretty disgusting and horrible to watch.
He goes to a lot of effort to get that ATM loaded into the back of that U-Haul.
He does, and he's by himself. So then he goes in and drags it, slides it all the way to the back of the U-Haul, loads it up in there by himself, and takes off.
All right, so your investigation quickly reveals that he's been busy trying to steal ATMs in a variety of places. This is a thing.
That's correct. So yeah, so I basically form up a document that has all the stuff that happened with our incident, including pictures from the surveillance footage, and send it out to other agencies in the area. And I got someone from LaGrange PD that responded right away and basically said, yeah, I had the exact same case. In that incident, it was pretty funny. The suspect, he also returns the U-Haul van, just like he did with our case. But I guess he parks his personal vehicle nearby there, which makes sense for why he then returns the van, because he has to go back to where his personal car is, loads that ATM up into a little Saturn passenger vehicle, and is driving across Alabama early in the morning, gets pulled over by Alabama State Patrol, and has this ATM laying across the back seat of his vehicle. So the trooper did a good job. That's a sign. That's a clue. So he's able to arrest the individual and had some charges for like burglary tools and stuff like that that he was in possession of. And then LaGrange PD is able to make burglary charges and everything for their case.